The Big Cat enjoyed a career year for the Seahawks last season, but he still wasn't originally a Pro Bowl selection and didn't make either All-Pro team. Can it be argued now that Leonard Williams is the most underrated player in the entire NFL? We're going to be discussing here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're tuning in from Easton, Washington, or Raleigh, North Carolina, we are now a month away, a little under a month away from the start of training camp for the Seattle Seahawks and ushering in the 2025 season. We've still got a bunch of positions to dive into post-offseason program. Today, it's all about off-ball linebackers, and we've got numbers 60 through 56 in our 90-man rundown. Let's get this jam-packed episode going, shall we? Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Leonard Williams had easily the best overall season of his career, at least from a statistical standpoint, for the Seahawks last season. 11 sacks, was able to go out and get a 92-yard pick six against Aaron Rodgers, tied defensive tackles for the league lead in quarterback hits. It was a remarkable season for Big Cat. And yet, he was not even initially voted to the Pro Bowl. He was an alternate that ended up getting onto the roster, was not selected first or second team All-Pro. And look, Rob, those mean a lot more to me than the NFL Top 100 lists that come out every year. To me, those are June and July fodder. That's what they are. It's to keep people talking football. It's working for us. I'm going to be making my argument not off of that, but of the other things I just mentioned here. But I have a big question here that I kind of want us to talk about for a second, and it revolves around where Leonard Williams fits in the NFL's most underrated player ecosystem. Because I think that you always hear about quarterbacks, and sometimes you hear about wide receivers or corners, your marquee positions that make a lot of plays on the football. Those positions we hear a lot of time about most underrated players, but you don't hear a lot about that when it's talking about players in the trenches. But I think when you look at the fact that Leonard Williams came in at 99th in that top 100 ranking, again, I'm not going to put really any stock there. But the argument I'm going to say right here, Rob, is if there are 98 players in the NFL that are better than Leonard Williams, I've got a piece of prime real estate for you on Mars. There's not 98 better players in the NFL than Leonard Williams. I believe he is the most underrated player in the NFL right now. We're talking today, this minute. I think he is the most underrated player at any position group, even with the fact that he ended up going to the Pro Bowl. To me, it was laughable that he wasn't even on the Pro Bowl roster to begin with.
Well, I 100% agree with you on that point. I think that it's absolutely comical. I mean, it's a travesty, really, just because, Leonard Williams was so physically dominant last season, Corbin, and the statistics just give you a small indication of how effective that he was. Because, of course, when you look at statistics like sacks, 11 from a defensive tackle, a guy who's 6'5", 290 pounds. So he's not only going to be obviously effective as a pass rusher, but with that size, he is very powerful, very effective against the run, and is able to knock down passes, as you mentioned, with the 92-yard pick six. And so, again, there's just so many things that Leonard Williams does to completely wreck a game, and none of those numbers give you any indication of how many times he was double or triple team blocked. As you talked about in the opening of today's show, we're going to be breaking down linebackers a little bit later. And obviously, for those linebackers to be effective, then they have to have somebody at the point of attack to be able to kind of take away some of the blockers that have been getting to them. Leonard Williams does that in such a fantastic form that, again, I have to agree with you. I think that Leonard Williams certainly is among the most underrated players in all of the NFL. I thought that his selection number 99 overall, just knowing some of the personalities at NFL Network, I guess that's maybe a small tip of the cap to Big Cat, who, of course, wears number 99. At the same time, it is just laughably low with where he is being ranked. For so long there was an argument that, hey, it's Seattle. The people in the East Coast, they just don't know. They don't stay up late enough. But damn it, you're talking about a player that obviously played for the Giants as well as the Jets. That was a superstar, early first-round pick out of USC. This is not some small school player. This has been a physically dominant player for, most of his NFL career. And as you said, last season was arguably his best.
Yeah, and I think you can look at the fact that the Jets and the Giants, his time with those two teams, he made the playoffs one time. The 2 years he's now been in Seattle, he has not been to the playoffs yet. So that was the argument that I made writing an article today on Emerald City Spectrum, that maybe that's what it's going to take for him to get the respect that he deserves, is getting this team to the playoffs and being a crucial part of that. But I still think you're looking at a 10-win team last year, the only 10-win team that didn't make the playoffs. It's not like the Seahawks were a 3-win outlet like Cortez Kennedy's win team in 1992. This was still a very solid football team, and they had a top 5 defense in the second half of the season, in large part because of what number 99 was doing it. And just to paint a picture here, because I can rattle off all the pass rushing stats with the 11 sacks, the 15 quarterback hits, nearly 60 quarterback pressures in 16 games. You have to remember he didn't play against the Lions, so he did miss a game last year, and he still did these numbers. I can rattle off the pass breakups. He had a couple of those. He had the pick. I can rattle those things off. But then when you consider that he was in the top 5 in run defense grade for defensive tackles from Pro Football Focus, and if you don't want to look at the grades, I can explain why he got that grade. He was in the top 10 in average depth of tackle because he was living in the backfield. He had 16 tackles for a loss last year. So he wasn't just making a lot of tackles. He was top 10 in run stops, but he was also turning a lot of those into plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. You can make an argument that he was as dominant of a run defender as any defensive tackle in the NFL the last 9 or 10 games when this defense was really humming. He was a huge part of that, setting the tone up front. But when you put those stats with his pass rushing numbers, the pick 6, no offense to the players that got on the All-Pro team, because Chris Jones, we know how phenomenal of a player Chris Jones is, future Hall of Famer. Cameron Hayward, future Hall of Famer. Jalen Carter's had a really good first 2 seasons in the NFL. Zach Allen's no longer Mr. Underrated himself. In Denver, he has turned into a household name. But none of those guys had as many sacks as what Leonard Williams had. None of them had a pick 6 like Leonard Williams had last year. Leonard Williams had more tackles for loss than any of those 4 players. He had more pressures than any of those players. I can keep going on and on. He was the only guy from this list that was in the discussion for the run-stopping stuff, too. His stats were just head and shoulders above all the guys that ended up beating him out. So, to me, that screams most underrated player. When you're talking the 4 best guys, the guys that were voted as the 4 best player, and this isn't to say that Williams didn't get votes. He got 8 first-team All-Pro selections last year, 8 votes. So it's not like he was shut out. But I still think the fact, no offense to Jalen Carter and Zach Allen, and even last year, Cam Hayward and Chris Jones, no offense to those guys, but Leonard Williams was the better player. To me, that screams Mr. Underrated, especially when you're looking at the fact that he barely got in the top 100, and he wasn't even in the top 100 last year, which I believe on this show, I'll go back and look, but I think we argued kind of about this last year when we were looking at the guys that were omitted from the top 100 for Seattle. I just think he's just a criminally underrated player. And when you just consider the 4 guys that got picked ahead of him, if the numbers were really close, then I would get it. But Leonard Williams was light years better than all these guys statistically. And I think when you watched games, I saw all 5 of these guys play a lot last year. Leonard Williams was the most disruptive player of that entire group.
No, he was. And that's the thing is, look, I have so much respect for all those players that you just mentioned, and for different reasons. I mean, Zach Allen to me is a technician. He is physical. He is, very, very, very effective football player, but he's not physically dominant the way it's saying a Jalen Carter just walks in there basically he can be a man amongst boys at times, the way he just tosses people. Chris Jones and Cameron Hayward, to me, are incredible players, future first ballot Hall of Fame kind of players. I don't know that last year during the regular season was their best seasons. Whereas with Leonard Williams, if it wasn't his best season, because he had some unbelievable seasons with the Giants as well as the Jets before. But at the same time, again, just in terms of the glitzy numbers like sacks, like the 92-yard pick six, things like that. And then just down-to-down consistency, the emergence on an emerging defense that I really think is about ready to kind of seize some control in the NFC West and really get a lot more people's attention out to the Pacific Northwest. Leonard Williams is being criminally underrated, and again, number 99 overall in this list of the top 100 players in the NFL. I think that it is at least acknowledgement. As you said, he wasn't on the list last year. So there's some people who are changing their opinions, but I don't think that they've changed their opinions enough. And I think that Leonard Williams is going to prove that to be true this upcoming season as well.
Yeah, if you want to look at the glass half full, you're making a really good point. Well, he did get on the list this year, but I think when you talk to most football people, they are going to say 99, what's going on here? Because of the way that he played last year, how he was the 10 games in Seattle the year before with 4 sacks in that span, and just how dominant he was there. He deserves a lot more recognition, his accolades. We're talking legacy here, Rob, and I know some fans got turned off on that word when Russell Wilson was here, but legacy is a huge thing for these players. And for Leonard Williams, the legacy isn't going to be accurately painted when you're looking at the accolades unless he starts getting some of these all-pros on his list, that he should have gotten at least a couple of them by this point. Last year being the most staunch example where he didn't get one that he should have. So here's hoping he continues to play at the dominant level he did last year. And this time around, Seahawks get to the playoffs. Leonard Williams ends up being on the all-pro team and maybe gets more votes for Defensive Player of the Year than he did last season. When we come back, we've got off-ball linebackers to talk about in our next position-by-position post-off-season program review. We'll get to that up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? I certainly do. With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, like a home or a car, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery apps. Now I'm budgeting smarter. It's actually been a week since I have used a food delivery app. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we've been doing since the conclusion of the offseason program, it's time to continue our position-by-position overview as we start heading towards training camp. And today it's all about the off-ball linebackers, and it's a much different discussion this time around. If we were talking last year, you had 2 incoming linebackers, Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson, on 1-year deals. Tyrese Knight was coming in as a 4th-round pick. There were a lot of questions, both short and long-term. Now you can say the opposite about this group because Ernest Jones comes over at midseason, trade deadline acquisition. Now he's got a new 3-year extension. Tyrese Knight started in the second half and played really well next to Ernest Jones. The expectations, those two are going to be able to just hit the ground running as full-time starters next to each other. So at least from a starter's perspective, both Jones and Knight give the Seahawks a much better situation, not only in 2025, but for the foreseeable future in the middle of Mike McDonald's defense. Depth-wise, there may be some concerns that we still have to address. Let's get into our 3 big questions that we've been tackling with each one of these position groups. And right now, we got to start with the first one. Which off-ball linebacker has got the most on the line? And this is kind of an interesting position group because I just mentioned we believe the Seahawks already have their 2 starters in the middle. So maybe there's not much on the line, at least in terms of playing time for those 2 guys. But this is going to potentially be a very competitive race for 2, maybe 3 spots behind Jones and Knight. You're muted.
Sorry about that. And then that's the thing, is I always trying to start off the conversation anytime we go through these positional overviews and the three burning questions, just to kind of make sure that everybody's familiar with the names. As you said, Corbin, we're likely to see 4, perhaps 5 inside linebackers, off-ball linebackers make this roster. 4 is typical. And so we're talking about Ernest Jones, the 4th. We're talking about Tyrese Knight, Patrick O'Connell, Drake Thomas, Josh Ross, Seth Coleman, Jalen Gaines, De'Aaron Jackson. Again, you're typically going to keep 4 of those 8. And so I think you can make an argument that any of the final 4, maybe any of the final 6 could be the player that we're going to be highlighting here as far as most on the line, but especially the fact that Ernest Jones is coming off of an offseason in which he signed a 3-year deal. So I think that some might think, well, hey, the pressure is not on him. But I disagree. I think that the pressure is on him, both from a contractual standpoint, from expectation standpoint. That 3-year deal was initially reported as 3-year, $33 million. It winds up being a 3-year, $28.5 million deal. And the Seahawks can get out of it in the 1-year, $10 million deal. So again, there is some pressure. Contractually speaking, for Ernest Jones. At the same time, because he's such a good football player, because as we've been talking about, that we expect this defense, which finished 6-2 in the final 8 games when Ernest Jones joined this squad, and not only significantly better against the run, but also just in terms of points allowed. And it was the only time that the Seahawks, finished, of course, with victories over the Rams, the 49ers, and the Cardinals with Ernest Jones at linebacker. Again, I think that there's all the reason to expect that Ernest Jones is going to excel. At the same time, I also think that with that expectation, there is an awful lot of, of suspense, an awful lot of there's a lot on the line for Ernest Jones, even though the fact that he returned on the 3-year deal and is arguably, or at least certainly among the best inside linebackers in the NFC.
And I'm going to argue for the other starter, Tyrese Knight. And the reason that I think he's got the most on the line, yes, we saw in those last 9 or 10 games last year, he played really well, particularly against the run. We saw him contribute as a pass rusher, got to the quarterback a few times on blitzes. The coverage was a little bit more inconsistent. There were some good plays. There were a few times where he seemed like he was a little bit lost and a little out of position. And he still is not a raw player because he played a lot of snaps at UTEP, but there's still some rawness in terms of playing linebacker the way that you had to play in the NFL, the step up in competition that he had, to change in scheme. And now that you are a full-time starter, you're not a rookie coming in anymore where you're behind a couple of vets and, you got some time to develop. You got thrown into action really quickly. Now, expectations are going to get ratcheted up. And Mike McDonald, he's going to expect a much better football player out there, one that understands the scheme, is able to really improve some of those areas that maybe were a little tougher for him as a rookie. And you're trying to not just stay in the start lineup this year. You're trying to show, hey, I'm going to be the running mate for Ernest Jones throughout his entire contract, because we'll both be free agents at that time. He wants to be a starter for the rest of the rookie contract. And look, he's got a lot on the line there, because if he does struggle and he has a sophomore slump, or he just does not play to the level McDonald wants, then I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he says, you know what, let's see what Drake Thomas can do, or let's see what Patrick O'Connell can do, or heck, Derek Jackson, maybe he's going to be a guy that's an undrafted rookie, played well when healthy at Kentucky. Maybe he makes his presence felt. There's other guys in the roster that could suddenly get an opportunity. I don't think that happens, but this is a big jump for him, being the full-time guy from the get-go, and he's got to deliver off what he did the end of last year by playing even better and being more comfortable in this defense. I think he's capable, but that does put some pressure on a young guy when you have that change of role, and you are now the guy next to Ernest Jones. As far as the most upside from this group, I'm going to stick with the same player here. I know a lot of people are going to be expecting Ernest Jones there, but I think Ernest Jones is a more polished product at this point. Yes. Not that he can't get better. He's still a very young player, but Tyrese Knight is the one that hasn't had a full year of starting experience, and he did have some of those, I guess you could call them warts, coming out of UTEP, that you wondered, is he going to be ready to play this quickly? He exceeded those expectations, but it's the guy that's got good athletic traits. He's a player that put up really gaudy stats at UTEP in every facet. A tackle machine, was involved as a pass rusher, got a lot of sacks, got his hands on the football a lot for pass breakups. There's a lot of already built and experience doing all those things. And so to me, that is the player, if he is able to take this opportunity and really seize it, that he can be just as good as Ernest Jones. And you could maybe make an argument that in the long run, it might be a guy that can actually be the better of the two. I don't know if that happens, but he's got the traits and he's got the coach to work with him in Mike Macdonald to make that happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there, Corbin. I think that Ernest Jones is clearly the better player right now. I think that there's a possibility that Tyrese Knight, because of his physical traits and just the jump that you expect to see in his second year in the NFL, second year playing more of a traditional off-ball linebacker rather than playing as a pass rusher. And pressure was the word I was struggling to articulate earlier, and pressure is actually something that I think that Tyrese Knight, because of his experience as an edge rusher at UTEP, that he is, kind of uniquely talented in that way. He's one of the few young linebackers I've seen, Corbin, for the Seahawks at least, that is actually better against the pass than he is against the run, because he does show good instincts in coverage, which is, a little bit of a surprise, considering the way he played in college. And he certainly shows good in snap anticipation. He used his hands pretty well. He's pretty flexible to kind of slither through traffic to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. He only had 1.5 sacks last year, and that one sack came against Kyler Murray in the Arizona Cardinals. So obviously a very mobile quarterback at that. He had 9 quarterback pressures, however, and 8 of those 9 times the Seahawks were able to force the opponent to have a negative play or wind up punting on the next play. So again, a very effective pass rusher, especially as the year went on, but he was blown off the ball too often in going up against the run. And that's why I would argue that he still has a higher upside, not necessarily that I think he's going to be a better player than Ernest Jones, but where I think that Tyrese Knight is right now, what Seahawk fans know of Tyrese Knight, I think that he has a huge ceiling here of what he can be in year 2, year 3, year 4. And again, just real quick, just because I butchered in my conversation a moment ago, I apologize when we were talking, again about Ernest Jones, is just, again, the upside with him. I think that he is an exceptional player already. He's still only 25 years old. This is still a guy who came in as a 3rd-round pick by the Rams and was starting by the end of his rookie season. That rookie season was when the Rams won the Super Bowl. I mean, he started in the Super Bowl as a rookie, had 7 tackles, a sack, and a pass breakup against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a really good player that when we had the conversations a couple of moments ago about some of the most criminally underrated players in all of the NFL, one of the very first guys I thought of was Ernest Jones, his teammate here with the Seahawks. So again, I think at the higher upside in terms of where they are right now, because Ernest Jones kind of hit the ground running for the Seahawks, effective immediately. Tyrese Knight is just scratching the surface of that. I think between the two of them, the bigger point is the Seahawks have 2 very good young inside linebackers. And I'm intrigued about the depth. You mentioned Drake Thomas by name, a moment ago. That's actually where I'm going to go with my bold prediction here. While I'm as excited as you can pretty much be when it comes to Seattle's 2 starting inside linebackers, if there is any drop-off of Tyrese Knight, if either one of them have any type of problems in terms of durability or anything like that, which has not been an issue for either of them in the past, I'm most excited about is Drake Thomas's run instincts. To me, he is kind of the chocolate to the vanilla, or the peanut butter and the jelly, just a great compliment to Tyrese Knight's ability as a pass rusher and as a guy in coverage. I think that Drake Thomas is also a little bit one-dimensional, but very much against the run. And he also happens to be one of the team's the best special teams players on the team too. So that's my bold prediction, is that Drake Thomas not only is going to make the squad, he's going to lead the Seahawks in tackles in the preseason. He's going to make the squad. He's going to wind up getting his first NFL start this upcoming year.
Yeah, my bold prediction for this group isn't really that bold in the scheme of things, at least in my opinion. But I think Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight both eclipse 110 tackles apiece, and I think they both get at least 2 sacks apiece, because I think Mike Macdonald's going to be very active, moving guys around and blitzing from every level of the defense, even more so than we saw last year. And I think both linebackers are going to benefit. So look for a lot of tackles and look for pass rushing production from both these guys. When we come back, we get our 90-man countdown, numbers 60 through 56, including a couple of day 3 incoming draft picks. Don't go away. You're listening to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. And for your second listen, don't forget to check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. The NFL draft is way in the rearview mirror. We've got training camp coming up, roster moves, and news never stop. We saw that today with Jalen Ramsey getting traded to the Steelers. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Rob, let's dive into our 90-man rundown. We are now to number 60. So we've gotten the first 30 players wrapped up so far already, but that means we still got 60 players left. We're looking at number 60 through 56. We've got some incoming rookies. We got a few players who have suited up for the Seahawks in this list as well. And there's some Mike McDonald connections beyond Seattle. And that's what we're going to start this off with here. We just talked linebackers, and one name that I don't know that we mentioned last segment at all that could very easily still be on this roster is Josh Ross. And he joined the Seahawks midway through the 2024 season after the Ravens waived him. And Mike McDonald coached him not only with the Ravens after he came into the NFL, but he also coached him at Michigan in 2021. So there is a long relationship between the player and coach here. And Ross has been a really solid special teams player at the NFL level. Hasn't really gotten a chance to play on defense, but he's another guy that if you absolutely had to put him in, I think Mike McDonald would have confidence, at least in his short term, that he could go out and play well because he does know the ins and outs of this scheme. I think he's going to be vying for one of those last roster spots against a few of these other linebackers and probably another safety or two that are coming from that really deep position group in the secondary.
Yeah, Josh Ross is a good football player. He's a little bit limited. He's 6 foot 230 pounds, and he doesn't have elite size, doesn't have elite speed, but he's got great instincts. He is a two-time team captain at Michigan. As you said, he was coached by Mike McDonald there. Of course, went to the undrafted free agent was the Baltimore Ravens. Mostly played on special teams, and he was all over the field on special teams for the Seahawks a year ago. Of course, there's 6 teams. There's kick coverage, and then kickoff return. There's punt coverage. There's punt return, and then there's the PATs or field goals, and then trying to block those field goals. He played in 5 of the 6 of them. The only one he didn't do is he wasn't a blocker for Jason Myers, but otherwise he was on every one of Seattle's special teams once he got brought in by from the Baltimore Ravens, who released him, as you said. So again, I think that he is one of those guys that Seattle brought him in. Last year he played effectively. I think that he is on the kind of the inside looking out as far as the roster projection right now. I think that it's going to be an interesting matchup between him, say, Patrick O'Connell. We talked about before Drake Thomas, and again, all these rookie linebackers. There are opportunities here at that inside linebacker position, and Josh Ross, because of his familiarity and it's just his effort and sheer desire. Again, I think that he is somebody that the Seahawks fans should better, be familiarizing themselves with him.
Over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about a number of players that are actually transitioning to a different position, or they are adding another position to their toolbox. And one of those guys is Brady Russell, who we've gotten to see play a handful of snaps as a tight end. He's mostly been a core special teams player, and I'm going to emphasize that word. He has been a core special teams guy. He's been one of their very best special teams players, another guy who plays on every team except blocking for Jason Myers. I actually think 2 years ago he might have even done that. The guy has played every special teams unit, and he's just a hard-nosed grinder, the kind of guy that coaches just absolutely love. And now he's going to be competing against incoming rookie Robbie Oots for the fullback job. And it's a position that he actually played a handful of snaps last year before. Unfortunately, he was dealing with some toe issues in the second half, and he missed a bunch of games. But they are going to be moving him to fullback, and he's going to get the opportunity to compete for that position. I personally think that Oots has the advantage there because he is built much more like a fullback, and I think that Clint Kubiak really wants that Patrick Ricard type guy that is 270, 275 pounds and just absolutely mauls people out of the backfield. I don't think that Brady Russell can give you that. However, if you're looking for a guy that you can move around to H-back and he can even go into the slot and you can do some different stuff with formation-wise, Brady Russell is going to give you that. And again, he's been one of the very best special teams players for the Seahawks since they got him off the Eagles practice squad 2 years ago when he was a rookie coming out of Colorado State. He's beloved in the locker room. I think it's going to be difficult for him to make this team unless he does find a way to beat Oots for that fullback job. I can't see both of them being kept. We'll talk tomorrow about a possibility that might open up a chance for him to be in this roster too, but we'll save that for our Tuesday show. Nonetheless, it kind of feels like he's in that Josh Ross situation where because of his special teams ability, don't count him out. I just think it's going to be tricky with this new position with the new competition he's got going up against.
No question about it. It's going to be difficult competition. There's a lot of players with the fullback position, just Oots, of course, but at that tight end or H-back role that we have grown accustomed to seeing Brady Russell, and of course, he can be very effective in that. I think Kubiak used a very versatile player in Taysom Hill, of course, in New Orleans, Kyle Juszczyk, of course, in San Francisco. Again, and there are some elements of their play to me that you see in Brady Russell more than, say, Patrick Ricard as far as just being an absolute sledgehammer at the fullback position. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Seahawks want to do with that spot. I know that there's been a lot of speculation that they're going to be going with a bigger fullback, and obviously you're dedicating a draft pick to Robbie Oots, and that suggests what's going to happen here. But as I believe it was Mike McDonald, it may have been John Schneider, one of the two of them certainly said, don't forget about Brady Russell. And I'm paraphrasing here, but don't forget about him because again, we know what a terrific football player this guy is, and so I think it's going to be interesting. And you mentioned Josh Ross. I mean, when I think about these two players, and Josh Ross and Brady Russell, it's almost like that Spider-Man meme. They look at each other, they're the same guy. That's the thing, is both of these players are so effective on special teams that you got to be thinking about that element of the game rather than just the role that they're going to have on offense in the case of Brady Russell, or defense with the linebacker before. I'm excited to talk about our next player on the list, and that being the edge rusher Tyreek Smith. To me, he is a guy that, obviously he was a 5th-round pick of the Seahawks back in 2022. You see the flashes in camp. He's got some burst to him. He's got some speed to him. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle. And I think that this is an edge rushing group, Corbin, that we have, some concerns about. And he's got to be able to create more big plays behind the line. And so, again, I recognize his talent. At the same time, 3 years into the NFL now, we still haven't seen any type of production. It is time for something to happen with Tyreek Smith to justify being, even in this point, in our roster breakdown.
And as you mentioned a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Tyreek Smith, the fact that Seahawks have brought him back, that says that Mike McDonald and the coaching staff, there is something that they see, that they feel that they can still unlock with him. And you do have that 5th spot. I mean, they've kept 5 edge defenders pretty much all of last year, and Mike McDonald did that in Baltimore. That's wide open right now, at least as the roster's constructed. So if you can have a healthy Tyreek Smith, he has enough size to play in the system. And we've talked about it, 260, that's about where Mike McDonald's cutoff has been with his edge players, at least in the NFL. He likes a little bigger guys that can handle the physical rigors, setting the edge as run defenders. So I think Tyreek Smith has enough size to do that. It's just going to boil down to, is he finally going to be able to deliver a little bit? Because there's been some good plays in the preseason, but it wasn't enough for him to make the roster a couple of years ago. He was in Arizona briefly. This really is kind of that put up or shut up time for him, but you do have an opportunity that has been presented to you. Let's talk a couple of the day 3 draft picks here at number 57 and 56 here on our countdown. Ricky White, the third, the receiver out of UNLV, formerly of Michigan State as well, coming in the 7th round, the last pick the Seahawks made of their 11 selections. And then 6th rounder, Bryce Cabeldue, the guard out of Kansas. We'll start with White here, and we've talked about this ad nauseum since he got drafted. And even before he got drafted, when we talked about receivers, Ricky White was a guy you and I both had 4th-round grades on. And in large part, it was because not just a really good special teams player, but he's also a guy that was very productive at UNLV without great quarterback play. It didn't matter. He still put up 1,000+ receiving yards each of the last 2 years. He scored a lot of touchdowns. He came through in the clutch. But the key to him making this team is going to be all about special teams because of the blocked kicks that he had last year, the fact that he returned a punt for a touchdown. I believe he only had 4 punt returns in his entire career, and one of them he took back to the house. He's just one of those guys that is a football player. He will do whatever you ask him to do. It's not a given that he makes this team just because there's a lot of guys battling for those receiver spots, but I think his special teams ability and the fact that I do think he's a quality enough receiver that he can make catches in the NFL, I think he is on the right side of the bubble. I don't feel that way right now about Bryce Cabeldue just because of the number of guards ahead of him, with Anthony Bradford still battling for that right guard job. You've got Satoa Lamea, Gray Zabel was drafted, Christian Haynes. Do they keep a fifth guy that can play guard? He's played some tackle, though. So I wouldn't rule him out. If he's able to come in when the pads come on and he makes some really nice blocks, who knows? Maybe we have a change of the guard there and the Seahawks start to mix and match guys a little bit. But he has not played guard beyond the East-West Shrine Bowl. So it almost feels like this could be a guy Seattle's going to be hoping they can get in the practice squad so that they can develop him with hopes down the line he might be able to play some snaps for them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's interesting. I'll talk about Cabeldue first. The offensive lineman, as you just said, from Kansas, of course, he's a 6th-round pick by the Seahawks, and had previously played right tackle. The Seahawks are going to move him inside to guard. Now, that often we often see rookies asked to make that transition. One of the reasons why I think that this is actually going to work for Cabeldue and the Seahawks is because Kansas ran the ball an awful lot, and they often had a tight end right on Cabeldue's hip, whether it be inline or as like more of an H-back role. And so he's used to playing with people around him. And that can be one of the real struggles for tackles who are used to being in space and they suddenly are, kind of boxed in at that guard spot. So when you look at Cabeldue's initial quickness, his ability to adjust the second level, there are some things about him that make him a really intriguing fit in the zone blocking offense. So again, I'm excited about him. And Ricky White, we had a conversation about a player a couple of days ago, Corbin, that didn't do so well at the combine, and then kind of surprisingly, at least to me, chose not to compete at his pro day. That was the opposite of Ricky White III. He wasn't very fast at the combine, 4.61. And I think a lot of people kind of just wrote him off. Well, they ran a 4.51 at UNLV. And I swear, when you watch him on tape, he runs and he plays like he's in the 4.4s. To me, that's what's going to be most interesting about him, is that the fact that he can absolutely fly downfield as a vertical threat. Stylistically, he reminds me of some of the receivers that I saw Kubiak have some success with in New Orleans, like a guy like a Rashid Shaheed, not Chris Olave, but that same type of just a blur on the field. I think he had 11 touchdowns a year ago, and a lot of them were over the top kind of rainbows. Exactly the type of throws I think that Sam Darnold's going to be able to throw very effectively in this offense. So again, I'm excited about Ricky White III. I'm excited about Bryce Cabeldue. I think that both rookies wind up making this roster. And I just think that stylistically and schematically, they're really good fits for what the Seahawks are looking to do.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We're almost at 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, so help us get over the top and hit that milestone. We greatly appreciate your support. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to be having a morning show, different in schedule compared to normal, but a morning Tuesday show, and we're going to be looking at how today's blockbuster between the Steelers and the Dolphins could potentially have a domino effect that leads to the Seahawks making a trade. We'll be breaking that down tomorrow coming up on our Tuesday show. Make sure that you're listening and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.